Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to a very special online event today. It's called Explore Compassion in Spirituality with Meister Eckhart's Wisdom, Mystical Teachings for Renewal, Love, and Forgiveness in Times of Turmoil. My name is Stephen Dyna. I'm the founder and president of the Shift Network, and I'm really blessed to be with you here, getting to explore an incredibly important topic for this moment, and really how to cultivate a compassionate heart in the midst of a lot of chaos and tumult. I know from talking to a lot of people and also for myself that the events of the world can become very scary and burdensome to people, and it's easy to close down. And that's exactly the opposite of what was now needed. And we're going to get to explore how to open more fully, even in times like these, with one of the preeminent teachers, theologians, pioneers in this arena. His name is Matthew Fox. He's the author of more than 35 books, so he's really been at the forefront of modernizing our spiritual inheritance and really applying it to our modern times. And he's particularly been very gifted in bringing forward the deep esoteric wisdom of mystics that sometimes get overlooked, and Meister Eckhart is one of those for sure. So, Matthew, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Stephen. And thank you for this platform that you've created over the years that I think is so fruitful for so many people.
Hmm. Well, I want to say right up front, we're going to have this time, and Matthew's got some great stuff planned for us, and we're going to have a chance to go much deeper with him on a brand new course called Cultivating Compassion in Spirituality. So more to come on that. We'll share more on that at the end of the hour. So Matthew, I'd love for you to share a little bit first about your personal story of journeying. I think particularly in why turning to Meister Eckhart and teachings on compassion and spirituality really became very central for you.
Well, I was very drawn to the mystics. You know, T.S. Eliot says mystics are the only hope, or else despair. There is a lot of despair in the world today, and there's a lot of bad actions on the part of human beings, obviously, facing climate change and even our own extinction. And so we want to ask, what is the best part of ourselves as a species that we can bring forth and really make visible to ourselves and with others? And I think that's where compassion comes in. When I study world religions, I see this amazing consensus among all the world religions that compassion lies at the heart of what spiritual teachers are trying to teach us. The Dalai Lama says that we can do away with all religion, but we can't do away with compassion. That compassion is my religion, he says. Well, Jesus said in Luke 6, be you compassionate as your creator in heaven is compassionate. So he's identifying compassion, and this is the Jewish tradition, with divinity itself. In the Jewish tradition, compassion is the secret name for God. And then in Islam, we have in the Quran, uh, Allah is called the compassionate one more than any other single title given to Allah. And so it goes through all religions. I think all of them are here to stir us up to this tremendous capacity we have to be compassionate. And compassion includes a lot of things, which we're going to be getting into. But this interested me very much because I think we have to get to the core of our spiritual traditions and ask, and how does my core, if I'm from the Jewish tradition or the Christian or the Buddhist or the Muslim, etc., how does this core relate to other religions so we can link up? Can we do compassion together? And of course we can. And a good example is this recent tragedy out of um, the war in Israel, where several carloads of workers who were from all over the world, but 7 of them were killed, and they were there as they are whenever there's a tragedy around the world, whether earthquakes or hurricanes or they were there to deliver food, and unfortunately they were killed. But I think this alone is a marvelous example. They were there to bring food to those who are hungry and suffering during wartime. And it just shows that's the best side of humanity, that we're capable of compassion, and they sacrificed their life in trying to help these others who were in starving and in trouble. So we have that story, and then we also have constant headlines about war and about tragedies, earthquakes, and rest, and of course climate change too. So this is the time for human beings to grow up and to move from adolescence to our fullness. And again, I think the spiritual traditions name that fullness as compassion.
Hmm. Well, let's bring it around to Meister Eckhart and talk a little bit about why his teachings and perspectives on compassion are so relevant today.
Well, you're so right. They are relevant and they are so rich. He was such a deep thinker and actor. He linked up, for example, in his day, the late 13th and early 14th century in Europe, he linked up with the women's movement because women were being oppressed, believe it or not. And he linked up with the Beguines, who were a movement of women who were trying to assert themselves outside the parameters of being nuns, therefore church protection, you might say, or a monastic structure, outside of that, and yet outside of marriage as well. So they chose a third path. And this was something new at the time. And the Pope at the time was very threatened by this women's movement. He condemned them 17 different times, which suggests that he wasn't too successful at wiping them out. And in fact, when he died, this was Pope John the 22nd, there were 300,000 Beguines all over Northern Europe. So, and he threatened priests, don't work with these women, because they were outside the current structure of social organizations. But Eckhart worked with them closely. And he also worked with the peasants. In fact, he was the first theologian to preach in the languages of the peasant. At that time, the German language was a series of dialects of peasant people, and he preached in that language. And he was also a theologian, intellectual, taught at the University of Paris at one time. But he found his vocation, if you will, supporting the women and supporting the peasants. And he told the peasants things like, you are all noble. You are all aristocrats because we're all born so noble and godlike and so forth. And this didn't go over real well with the noble classes of Germany at the time. So Eckhart's life story is amazing. He was condemned at the very end of his life. In fact, after he died, a week after he died, some of his ideas were condemned. But he supported these movements, the peasant movements and the women's movements. So he was putting his teaching of compassion into action. And so we're going to explore, because he teaches so many angles on the subject of compassion. For example, he says, compassion means justice. So with that one statement, he's bringing in the whole prophetic tradition of Israel. And his influence had been very great, kind of outside the church. People like Karl Marx and Erich Fromm, the psychologist, and even Martin Buber. Martin Buber did his doctoral thesis on Eckhart and two other mystics. And so his influence outside the church has been very great because the church condemned him a week after he died. But now is a time, and even in the church today, they're saying that he was unjustly condemned. It was because he was an activist. He was putting his ideas into practice, that he stepped on the toes of the aristocrats, and he stepped on the toes of some bishops who were aristocrats, belonged to the upper class in Germany at the time, and he stepped on the toes of those who didn't want women to be themselves. So he's a marvelous combination of both theoretician, understanding where compassion comes from, how we develop it, and how to practice it. And so I think he just stands out. For example, he wrote a whole treatise on Jesus' teaching in Luke 6, be you compassionate as Creator in heaven is compassionate. And when I was writing my book on compassion years ago, called The Spirituality and Compassion, I was looking so hard for a Christian theologian from the past, and what they had to say about that important passage. And Eckhart had more to say about it than any other Christian theologian I could find, except for one who was a convert from Buddhism in Japan, a Japanese Christian who had been a Buddhist. And he wrote a good book on compassion in the 20th century. But Eckhart did this back in the 14th century. So he's a marvelous teacher of compassion. And other great thinkers, like the fellow who brought Zen to North America, Dr. Suzuki. He loved Meister Eckhart, and he told the Catholic monk Thomas Merton in 1958 that he should read the one Zen thinker of the West, Meister Eckhart.
Hmm.
And this changed Merton from being a kind of a dualistic, shame-ridden monk for 18 years into a prophetic Christian. From 1958 to 1968, when he died, Merton had shifted his agenda of the books he wrote and so forth. And there he turned to writing about war and about the racism of toward indigenous people in America, as well as toward Black people in America. And he became much more involved, and of course, in the environmental movement, He was right there supporting Rachel Carson as soon as her book came out, which was, of course, the book that launched the environmental movement. But he says all this was because of Eckhart. In his very last book, on his journey to Asia, Merton was writing in the sides of the book, Eckhart is my lifeboat. Eckhart is my lifeboat.
Hmm.
So Eckhart's had a profound influence, but he deserves even more. And to focus on compassion, I think, at this time in history, when humanity needs it so much, including compassion toward ourselves. Eckhart says compassion begins at home with our own body and our own soul. So it's not just about racing out the door to save others, it's also about taking care of oneself and begin from there. Like Jesus said, love others as you love yourself. So we
Hmm.
practice compassion first with ourselves.
I love that. And it'd be great to build on that a little bit and explore the how from Meister Eckhart's perspective. How do you truly become compassionate for yourself, your own embodiment, and your own challenges so that you can then really extend that to others?
You know, I might throw in here a little practice if I can, um, because I think that's a good way to begin. Um, there's a Native American practice, which I think mirrors very much what Meister Eckhart says, and also what Martin Buber says about compassion. And it goes like this: that a grandfather was talking to his grandson, who said to him one day, "I feel as if I have two wolves lying in my heart, fighting in my heart. One wolf is the vengeful, angry, violent one. The other wolf is the loving, compassionate one." And the grandson said to his grandfather, "Which wolf will win the fight in your heart?" And grandfather said, "The one I feed, the one I feeding, the one I feed." This is what practice is. I think it's feeding the compassionate wolf in us and recognizing we do have this other wolf in us. And again, it's not so much as beating up on that other wolf. It is about paying attention to and nurturing and growing this compassionate self. And the basis of compassion is interdependence, the awareness that your joy is my joy and your suffering is my suffering. And again, Meister Eckhart put that in one simple sentence. He says, what happens to another, whether it be a joy or a sorrow, happens to me. That's interdependence, the realization that we share common joy. That's why we celebrate. And we share common sorrow. And that's why we do our best to remove the sorrow of one another and the suffering of one another. And this is where justice comes in too, because justice is like a fence that allows injustice to lower its presence among us and within us. And this is why Eckhart can say also, he says, compassion is where peace and justice kiss. I guess you get that from a psalm, but I love how he just puts it out there. Compassion is a combination of peace and of that struggle for justice. So all this is about practicing compassion, nurturing it, and uh, and beginning with ourselves. And then you begin to look at the world differently, and you begin to see um, how you can be useful for others to learn the same kinds of lessons. And part of the compassion then is letting go. It's the mindfulness of entering into a place of silence and of centering and of emptying. We can empty ourselves for a while of our moral outrage, knowing it's there and that it has a place. But to enter into that deeper place of solitude and quiet and calming the reptilian brain, that then allows us to emerge um, more more equipped to spread nonviolence and instead of violence. And so I think that people like Dr. King and Gandhi and others, and Mandela and others, who have developed this practice of nonviolence, that they, of course, are dealing in the realm of compassion, uh, just like Meister Eckhart talked about it. That compassion is we find peace and justice, and we bring that forward.
Hmm. Well, so many different threads you're weaving together there and really painting a beautiful picture of why compassion is so important. And let's dive a little bit more into the practice and understanding more about like, beyond an idea of compassion, how do we cultivate it? How do we feed that, the right wolf and to really feed that in our lives and so that we have the deeper level of compassion for ourselves and for others.
Yeah. Well, why don't we do that today? And this is a tremendous advance, I think, in terms of science, is that science has come around to this ancient mystical teaching, and it's a teaching both in East and West, but Eckhart articulates it very strongly in the West, of our interdependence. That physics itself is saying today that all beings are interdependent. And, if you run the movie of the universe backwards 14 billion years, we come to a common origin. So we're all kin. By we, I mean we in the galaxies, we in the stars, we in the sun and the earth and so forth. So interdependence, science is now saying, is a habit or a law, actually, if you want to call it that, of the universe. Well, this is what mystics have been saying, you see, that we're all capable of this interdependence. This is the ocean in which we swim. And uh, and it's interesting that the word for compassion in both Hebrew and Arabic is the word for womb. It comes from the same root word as womb. So in the womb, there's this amazing interdependence between mother and child. And that's the origin, really. That's the template for our relationship to the universe. When we emerge from the womb and we join the world, if you will, that pattern is already within us. And it just becomes a much larger relationship. So to dwell on that, to meditate on that, and to bring science in, because science today, when it utters truths like that, is part of the wisdom traditions of the world, because it is echoing what Buddhism has said, what the Christian mystics have said, what Judaism has said, and so forth, about this depth of relationship that we call compassion. And it's out of this interdependence that we rejoice at one another's joy and we sorrow at one another's sorrow. So all that helps to nurture, to feed us. You're realizing that we're playing around here with real habits of the universe, and humans are not outside nature. We're not outside the universe. We're very much inside and involved in it. We don't have to make up our own rules so much for getting along. We can see these patterns already in nature itself. So for me, it's a tremendous moment in history when physics and mysticism, the mystics, link up. And then you have really a basis for a whole new civilization, a whole new way of humanity looking at our role in the history of the earth and the history of the universe. And again, then these echoes from these teachers, Buddha and Jesus and many others, be you compassionate. Or as Dalai Lama says, compassion is my religion.
Hmm.
So we're onto something here when we're talking about compassion. And it's deeply personal because, as Eckhart says, it begins at home with your own body and your own soul. But it's also obviously has tremendous impact for society, for recreating institutions of education, of politics, of economics, of farming. I think that the menu is here for humanity reinventing itself
Hmm.
and being transformed through the power of compassion.
It's a wonderful vision. And I'm feeling called to ask a little bit because sometimes we can have paint more of a purely soft vision of compassion and not include some of the sometimes there's some necessary anger or moral outrage around things. And I'd love for you to share about, from your perspective, how those fit together with compassion.
Well, I'm real glad that you brought that up. That's right. I think that sometimes compassion has been reduced to pity or feeling sorry for people. And that's not what it's about. To say that compassion means justice, which is Eckhart's sentence, but it comes from the Jewish prophetic tradition, is to say that we have a responsibility to stand up to injustice and to tap into moral outrage and to use it not by destroying others, not in a violent way, and not by spraying the world with invective and bad energy, bad karma, but to put it to wise use. And like Aquinas says, compassion includes the rational. You have to think it out. You have to have a strategy about how to turn suffering into healing. And of course, again, here's where a lot of science can help, and we find ourselves being able to deal with diseases and so forth because we are smart enough to take things apart and figure out how some of this suffering, where it's coming from. We have raised our average age of death from 40 just a century or two ago to around 80 today. And that's a great achievement, I think, to be able to be 80 as a whole, general number rather than 40, which it was not so long ago. So clearly, you use our mind. That's what Eckhart is saying. It is about passion, compassion, but it's also about the mind. He says we have to bring them together, our intelligence and our rational side, along with our intuitive and our playful side. That's part of building a society that honors compassion, which really is, I think, the best single name for talking about the divinity inside of us all, the nobility inside of us all, the image of God that's inside of us all, the Buddha nature, or the cosmic Christ, or Selem, the Hebrew word for image of God. That I think humanity has to look at its greatness and its nobility. We can't just take the headlines from the internet and the news that are so filled with all the bad stuff we do. We know that. We know we're capable of that other wolf that's in us, but that we have this compassionate wolf in us, as you say, and as the story says, we've got to feed that too. And that's what I hope we can do with this class. Now, Eckhart is going to be our primary guide, but there will be a whole class on other traditions that are also teaching us about how to get to compassion and how to practice it. So again, I think it's so exciting that we're living in a time of what I call deep ecumenism or interfaith, where we're rubbing shoulders, elbows with people of all other traditions and none. But atheists are capable of compassion, humanists are capable of compassion, and Buddhists and Christians and Jews and indigenous people and Muslims, all of us are. That's the point. This is what it means to be human,
Hmm.
that we don't just go around conquering one another, we're also capable of healing one another.
Hmm.
And I remember Margaret Mead was once asked by the great anthropologist years ago at Columbia University, but she was asked about what's the sign of civilization that goes back the furthest of all centuries now. And she said, when you see a broken leg that's been healed, that's been wrapped or something like that, that's a sign of ancient civilization, because that's a sign of compassion. It's a sign of people caring for those instead of leaving those behind that have a broken leg to be eaten by the nearest lion or tiger or something. That the humans got together and tried to bring along the sick and the disabled and the old, and didn't just leave them for dinner for the wilder animals. She said for her that was a sign of authentic civilization,
Hmm.
that humans were capable of compassion.
Well, I love that you're bringing together these different threads from different traditions. I wonder if you want to, you had a few different experiential practices you wanted to bring forward. I know Hildegard von Bingen has also been an inspiration for you, and you wanted to bring forward a meditation from her that we can take on. So, do you want to do that next?
Thank you. I'm happy to do that. One of her paintings, people know that she drew a number of mandalas and paintings. One of my favorite, and it's on the cover of my book of her paintings called Illuminations. That's what she called her paintings, Illuminations of Hildegard of Bingen. But she calls this one The Man in Sapphire Blue. The Man in Sapphire Blue. Now, first of all, notice the color blue is quite prevalent in this painting. The man is all blue, and the surroundings there are blue as well. And blue, of course, is a healing color, isn't it? It's very much a gentle and healing color. But what the man is doing here is that he's got his hands like this. So what I'm going to invite people to do is this. Begin with your hands at your side, and then bring them up slowly and put them in that form where Hildegard has painted her man in sapphire blue. And she says the man in sapphire blue is the healing Christ in all of us, the healing Christ in all of us. If you prefer the language of the healing Buddha, that's fine too, or the healing image of God. But notice what the hands are doing. Now do this practice again. Put your hands at your side and lift them up, and pay attention to what's going on in your body. You'll notice your whole chest is rising. And so what's happening is your heart is being stirred, it rises to put its energy into your hands. So it's an amazing archetype, what she's painted here, amazing archetype for compassion. Compassion is putting our heart energy into our hands. It's going to work out of your heart, not just out of your head, out of your wallet, or purse that you got to make money, etc., etc. But you're being motivated and energized from your heart forward. You're putting your heart into your hands. So we can ask ourselves, in what way is our work like that? Obviously, if you're a nurse or a doctor, it seems pretty literal, or maybe a person who does massage or something, that's literally putting your heart into your hands. But the truth is that all good work is about taking your heart to work, putting your heart into your hands. And that's compassion. And Hildegard, in the chapter in which I draw together her teachings about this one painting, and she did about 36 paintings. She goes on about the nature of compassion and what's really involved. And she even talks about interdependence again. And this is 800 years before science was talking about interdependence. And she talks about justice and compassion. And she talks about the motherly energy of compassion. Again, I referred earlier, I think, to the womb being the etymological basis for the word compassion in both Hebrew and Arabic. So she gathers all kinds of rich teachings about compassion. But again, all these things can settle on us if you do this little practice to bring your hands up, just as she did, and put them forward. And be in the presence, therefore, of the healing Christ who is in all of us, the blue man, or the healing Buddha, or the healing image of God. Now, what's interesting is that Hildegard, this was a vision she had, this mandala, the man healing blue man. But Swami Muktananda in the 20th century, a Hindu saint, he said that the most powerful meditation he did in his whole life, and he did many meditations, many powerful ones, was about a blue man, that he saw a pearl of an oyster morph from being white to blue, and then from being a pearl to being a man. And he goes on about this and develops it. And he said this meditation was so powerful to him that he overcame his fear of death that had been with him his whole life. It changed his life. And that's why he said it was his number one meditation. And in many Hindu ashrams around the world, there's a very special season of the year where people gather just to meditate on this blue pearl. And it's interesting, too, that Hildegard's meditation on the blue man, 8 centuries before Swami Muktananda's, this also included a pearl. So why does a pearl keep coming up with the blue man? Well, a pearl is an imperfection in an oyster, that gets worked on by sand and the sea and becomes a gem. And I think that's an archetype for humans. We can all recognize our imperfections, or at least we recognize imperfections in others. Doesn't hurt to take a look at oneself also. But that's not the end of the story, our imperfections or their imperfections. The excitement is that we're also capable of beauty, of being gems to one another. And think of these 7 people who devoted their life to bringing food to starving people because of war or earthquakes or hurricanes or disasters, you see. That this kind of love is what compassion is. We're all capable of. This is humanity at its best. That's why we want to have a class on compassion and to bring along great teachers like Hildegard and especially Meister Eckhart in this class, but others from around the world too, because we can easily forget. The news doesn't swamp us with stories of compassion. In fact, our language even eats away at the very meaning of compassion. There's an amazing statement in Webster's dictionary. It says the idea that compassion is about a relationship between equals is obsolete. Obsolete. That's from the English dictionary of about 30 years ago when I wrote my first book on compassion. And I was astounded by that because that destroys the whole biblical tradition of compassion as justice. Justice is about creating equality and fairness and balance and seeing one another as equals. All people are created equal. Isn't that a line someplace? So to think that our very language has misled us about compassion and turned it into something hitty or, as you said, soft. No, it's not about something soft. There's a gentleness at times to it, but there is also a warrior energy to it, to see things through. And think of Mandela, think of King, think of Gandhi, what they put themselves through and inspired others to go through to see that justice happened, that injustice, that segregation, that racism, that oppression was undone that takes warrior energy. And the same is true of Jesus, of course. That's what his death is about, that he stepped on the toes of those who were oppressing others.
Makes total sense. And I want to continue our exploration of some of these other traditions. And I know one of the great contemporary masters that really has influenced a lot of people, Thich Nhat Hanh, who's no longer with us, but he was definitely a beacon of compassion. And wonder if you want to bring forth a breathing exercise from him that we can apply in our own
Well,
lives.
one of Thich Nhat Hanh's favorite practices, and it's very simple and portable and cheap, we all can do it. It's about breath. Is simply to sit still and ground yourself, and of course work on our breath. So we can pull in the breath of anger, for example, and exhale compassion. So let's do that. Let's pull in anger and exhale compassion. And you can do that several times. Pull in anger, exhale compassion. So these are simple but powerful practices that you can do at home and almost anywhere.
Hmm.
And it really is a fine way of doing what Eckhart said. Begin at home with compassion toward your body and your soul. And of course, breath is such a wonderful device, if you look at it that way, because it brings breath, body and soul together, doesn't it?
I wonder if you could speak a little, thank you. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit to the practice of forgiveness and how it relates to
Mm.
self-compassion, since a lot of times, compassion people can think of it as like, oh, I should be compassionate, but I'm not because there's unresolved stuff. And so maybe relate a little bit how to work with forgiveness practice in the context of compassion.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. And forgiveness is another practice of letting go. The via negativa, it's called the via negativa, is a place of letting go. And like silence and letting go of images and letting go of ideas and the monkey mind and all those uh, practices that we undergo daily, but to find that space to let them go, to be in a quiet place. Therefore, but forgiveness is a part of that because, as you say, we carry wounds, we carry our wounds, and including the wounds we've inflicted on others. So forgiveness too begins at home, and we have to learn to forgive ourselves as well as to forgive others. And forgiving does not mean forgetting. That is to say, if we've been wounded, there are lessons to learn from that. Maybe we were overly naive, for example, or maybe we had it coming. Maybe we hurt others and were indifferent to that or naive again. That which wounds us and which we need forgiveness for, or toward others, toward self or others, are lessons that hopefully we grow up and we mature and we realize that we're capable of wounding others. Others are capable of wounding us and may not even know how much they've wounded us, for example. But and so when it comes to forgiveness, again, you could practice some of these practices from Thich Nhat Hanh, that you can call in the wound that is hurting you especially and breathe out the letting go of the wound, and that is what forgiveness is. So you call in the wound, inhale the wound, exhale. Inhale the wound, exhale. There's a Buddhist, Japanese Buddhist poet who says we have to um, treat all injury as your fire. Um, and the image I get from that is that it's like picking up sticks and putting them into a fireplace. You see, then it serves you. But when you pick up sticks to put into the fireplace, you have to hold them first. You have to kind of embrace the wound. So it's not out there someplace. But it's only temporary, this embrace. You carry it, you will, to the fireplace and you let it go. And so that is, you inhale the wound, but then you let it go that way and let it serve you. Let that fire and that um, uh, destruction of the pain, let it actually become energy for you. So here too, we can apply in a very simple fashion Thich Nhat Hanh's practices of breathing in and breathing out.
Hmm.
And Meister Eckhart says, we sink eternally from letting go to letting go into the one. So this practice of letting go, whether it's letting go of forgiveness or the letting go of other sorts of pain, um, this is a practice that really goes on and on until ultimately it's our last breath is a letting go. And so the fear of death that sometimes dominates people, uh, you prepare for that by developing your muscles of letting go, if you will, these practices of letting go.
Hmm. One final area that I think would be useful, it kind of connects a little bit with the moral outrage question earlier, is the nature of the warrior, the compassionate warrior. So how summoning the warrior energy for in the cause of justice and the cause of activism and working with doing that in a compassionate way. I'd love for you to speak a little bit about that in the context of Meister Eckhart and other mixed mystics.
Yes, I think that warrior energy, another word for it is courage. And the word courage is two French words, cœur, large, a big heart. And so that the growing of our hearts, how do we grow our hearts? How do we make ourselves bigger and therefore more courageous? Well, Thomas Aquinas says that joy expands the heart. Joy expands the heart, whereas fear shrinks it. You get down into this modality when you're afraid and defensive. But joy is expansive. You want to share joy. You want to tell others about it. You want to celebrate not alone but with others. So, and of course, life has both the inhaling and exhaling, and it has the expansion and the contraction. Our lungs do both. So life is not just expansion. We'd explode. We'd explode like a hot balloon. But neither is it just inhibition or taking in. You see, and hunkering down. That's where fear reigns. And the teaching is that love drives out fear. So you want to find that balance between inhaling and exhaling and expanding and contracting. But if you're ever in doubt, expand, because that's what the universe is doing. That's what we've now learned about the universe. It's on a great expansion journey. And therefore, it's biased in favor of expansion. So to pay attention to the joy in our lives, the via positiva that the mystics talk about, and also the via creativa. A lot of joy comes from creating. Like this painting behind me is Miles Davis. The painter was a 24-year-old African American in Oakland, who I ran into years ago, and I think it's a marvelous telling of Miles Davis' journey as an older person, as a younger person, and the energy of the dancers and the trumpet and all that. And it's full of energy and light. And so that's how what art does to us, and it does it to the artist. It really is about bringing forward the joy of life and the wonder and the beauty and the diversity of it all. So that's learning to celebrate, isn't it? So paying attention to our creativity and of course nature's creativity and beauty and that of other humans and other art forms. Um, and dwelling on that, don't just go and see a movie. If it moved you, be with it. Have a conversation about it, or write a poem about it, dance it, put it into your own expression, or journal it. So all these are ways to keep joy alive, the via positiva, which has a special relationship to the via creativity, to creativity. So look for the creativity and celebrate it when you go out into nature, or human nature at its best and doing its creative work, and yourself as an artist. That we're all artists in some way, because we all have something to say, and even our music and our conversation is a way of celebrating life. So to realize that the celebration of life is primal in our spirituality, that this is what we want to keep alive, is this undercurrent, this ocean of gratitude and joy and wonder. And that's what keeps us going as a species. And that's greater. The late Rabbi Zalman Schachtner, he used to say, there's more good than evil in the world, but not by much. I love the pragmatism of that statement. It's
That's
so
good.
true. It comes back to me often, especially reading the news. But notice the saying, it's such a fine line, the good and the evil, that you have to work at the good. We have to work at the good. We have to recognize it. It's not just winning. It's not everywhere. Often we wake up in the morning and we feel that the opposite of good is winning, and the good is losing. But that's why we have to work at the good. We have to develop a keener awareness of gratitude. And don't wait till your last breath, or don't wait till your body collapses or something to say, oh, gee, that was wonderful when I could walk in the woods, wasn't it? Or that was wonderful when I could taste good food and new soup, homemade soups and all that. Well, make the soup now while you're still healthy. Walk in the woods now. Thomas Merton once said, it's raining outside. He said, I'm going to take my hat off and go walking in the rain, because before long they will be selling us the rain. I love that. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of joy in life to take in, and you got to work at it sometimes. Don't take it for granted.
Don't take it for granted. Well, you are just a fountain of great wisdom, and I love so many of the quotes, and you're just steeped in the world mystical traditions. What a blessing, Matthew. So I want to spend some more time talking explicitly about your upcoming program, because it's really such an important opportunity for us to cultivate the compassion that is at the heart of a really authentic spiritual life. So we are blessed that Matthew has agreed to teach this brand new program for Shift participants, and is called Cultivating Compassion in Spirituality: What Meister Eckhart and other world mystics can teach us about navigating collective turmoil. So it's really going to be a harvesting of mystical wisdom applied to your life, and how you can cultivate compassion for yourself, for others, and ultimately the world. And so you become a walking vehicle of compassionate action, as sort of an embodiment of what the spiritual path is all about. So you can find this course laid out in detail at compassioninspirituality.com, compassioninspirituality.com. It's a 7-week program. There's no prerequisites. So it's really just if you are drawn to go deeper on your path and want to steep yourself in the wisdom of these different mystical lineages, and really have Matthew's guidance to cultivate this authentic, engaged, embodied practice of compassion. So, Matthew, I'd love for you to share a little bit in your own words about the intent and the outcome that you're aiming for all participants to have, and then I'll read out the module titles. You can give us a preview of what's coming in each.
Well, as you say, the world is in turmoil. I don't think there's too much argument about that. And so we want to look at what is that deepest energy, that deepest gift that all humans have in common. And are there ways to bring this? The name for it is compassion, I think, and it's living out a habit of nature, as we said earlier, as science has now identified it. But of course, the mystics have been talking about this forever, about interdependence. So it's a marvelous marriage of science and mysticism today. And so, what are the spiritual implications of science coming on board and helping us name interdependence? Thomas Merton, the Catholic monk, 3 hours before he died, gave a public lecture and in Bangkok. And he said, he defined compassion there. He said, compassion is a keen awareness of the interdependence of all living things that are all part of one another and all involved in one another. So again, that interdependence is at the core of things. So the fact that we have science on our side in talking about compassion today is huge, because when science and spirituality can link up, humanity can move forward. And I think that you can look at the great avatars, the great teachers of spirituality, whether it's the Buddha in the East or Lao Tzu or others, or whether it's Jesus or Isaiah or um, the more contemporary people, Sojourner Truth, and Dalai Lama, and Dr. King, and so forth, or Muhammad, others, that really they're all talking the language of compassion. And it is about self-care, and it's about caring for others. And so we're going to explore this. And of course, some poets have really contributed to this too. And so we're going to, the first class, I wanted to go into a brilliant poem that Adrian Rich wrote about compassion. It just brings in so many angles on it, just this one poem, that it's just a great way to introduce the topic. But so the mystics all have a lot to say about it. Julian of Norwich talks about how compassion is the essence of motherhood. And so she develops the whole idea of God as mother more fully than anyone to the late 20th century. She wrote in the 14th century, right after Eckhart. She got a lot of ideas from Eckhart. And this is one more instance of how central Eckhart has been in the Western consciousness of leading us into our divinity, into our compassion, therefore.
Hmm. So the actual title for Module 1 is Consecrate Your Heart and Mind and Live Compassionately in the World with Today's Science, Feminist Poets, and Meister Eckhart. So you've talked a little bit about that. How about Module 2, Deepen Your Definition of Compassion through Biblical Traditions and Meister Eckhart's interpretation of compassion as justice?
Rabbi Heschel loves to talk about compassion as the essence of the God nature. And of course, Isaiah and the other prophets, remember, it's Isaiah who laid out what we call the works of mercy, the works of compassion, feeding the hungry and clothing the naked and visiting prisoners and healing the sick. And all the, when you think about it, when humanity is doing its job well, when a culture is doing its job well, we incarnate compassion into our professions. You know, you want to be a doctor, you want to be a nurse, you want to be a massage therapist, or you want to be a therapist, help people with their emotional struggles and so forth. But also you want to be a carpenter, you want to fix people's cars for them. You can see all of this in the context of compassion. You see, when our work is healthy, and by healthy, I mean when it's good work, serving others and building up a community and rendering people happier. So the biblical tradition obviously has a lot to say. And of course, Jesus picks up on these in Matthew 25. He picks up on Isaiah saying, you know, when you feed the hungry, you feed me. When you clothe the naked, you clothe me. And so the whole idea of stepping out of just our ego identities, the big I, into realization that we are one another, whether we're doing this, the serving and the healing, or whether we're receiving and being healed. And of course, we all find ourselves in both positions at some times in our lives. Certainly, older people are learning anew how to receive. Hopefully, there are people around, people's children and grandchildren and others, professionals, who can, you know, take care of our needs. And just as hopefully when we were younger and parental age, we were taking care of our children's needs. So there's this amazing circle in life of giving and receiving compassion.
Great. So Module 3, explore the role of letting go and suffering in the cultivation of a compassionate heart and life.
When we have undergone our own breakdown, think of AA, for example, when people fall victim to addictions and alcoholism or something, that the key is that they have help from others who know the addiction because they've been there too. And that's the wounded healer, you see. And so most of compassionate world is happening from people who have learned from their own woundedness. And that's a big part of enlarging the circle of compassion as a practice and developing your own powers as a healer. Again, the man in sapphire blue that is inside all of us, that capacity to heal and to be healed.
Module 4, engage moral imagination as a catalyst for global renaissance of compassion.
There's an amazing teaching from the poet Denise Levertov. She says, humanity's capacity for evil is less a positive capacity for all its horrendous activity than a failure to develop humans' most human function, the imagination, to its fullness, and consequently, a failure to develop compassion. Amazing statement about the relationship between evil and the failure to develop compassion, and that our imagination is the key. This is our power, imagination. Are we using it to relieve suffering, or are we really using it to create more suffering?
Module 5, discover the opposites of compassion to create healthier work, politics, and economic models.
Well, Erich Fromm says that the psychological cause of fascism is self-hatred. Self-hatred. We have a rise of fascism and authoritarianism sweeping the world these days. And if Erich Fromm is right, and he often is, then the real bottom line of dealing with this energy around fascism or autocracy is to get at why do people hate themselves? Why are people so depressed that they blame themselves in an unconscious way? But then they project it on everyone else, you see, and that seems to motivate a lot of the compulsion to authoritarianism and to control over the others. So I think it is important to bring in these dimensions of awareness that a healthy psychology can bring, and to realize the causes of a lot of that suffering.
Module 6, honor the divine thread of compassion and ecumenism in Buddhism, Islam, Hinduism, Africa, and African American religions.
Yes, as I said earlier, I think when you examine all the world religions, that they all have a lot to say about compassion. And just one example, in Africa, there's a term called Maat, M-A-A-T. And in Native American religion, of course, in the Lakota religion, there's a phrase that is part of all the prayer, well, Aho Mitakiasi, which means all our relations. But Mat in Africa is about our relations of justice and of balance. And it's a primal virtue that is to be instilled in all the young people and in a culture as a whole. So too, among indigenous people, this idea of all our relations, this is what we're really praying to clean up and to celebrate and to find joy in, but also to recognize when things are out of kilter and when relations are broken, whether relations with self, with other kin and humans, or with nature herself. And of course, the whole climate crisis is a crisis in relationship, isn't it? And so, but all our religions in this way are talking about compassion, how to bring that balance back, that dance back between peace and justice, and joy and justice. So we'll be exploring this in one class, especially calling on the wisdom of so many of the world traditions, all of which are eager and hungry to talk about compassion and show us ways.
And finally, Module 7, embody compassion in your noble self to renew your spirit and uplift a chaotic and uncertain world.
My mentor, Per Shanu, and he defines spirituality as, quote, our true nobility, unquote. And I really like that we're all noble. We're all of great worth. And I think this is at the heart of Jesus' teaching and so many other spiritual teachers. So how do we get back to that and get over the self-hatred that Eric Fromm talks about that is the cause of so much oppression and suffering in the world? And the sense of our true nobility that empowers us to be agents and compassionate agents to infiltrate our professions, our work worlds, to see that our work really is bringing forward the best of humanity, the best of ourselves. And I think the best name for that is compassion.
Hmm. Well, it's clear this is going to be such a comprehensive and holistic approach to compassion that really is with the self, with the other, and really and looks at both sides of the coin and some of the darker shadow sides of human nature and how to work with those as well. So really, what a great program. So again, the whole program is laid out in detail at compassioninspirituality.com. And in addition to the 7 90-minute live modules where you have your chance to ask your questions live of Matthew, in addition, you'll have recordings of every session, both video and audio, as well as word-for-word transcripts to work with, study, and highlight. Be weekly exercise and practices for home. There's Facebook community to deepen your connection with other participants. There's also some small group time to discuss things and apply practices together in communion with others. And there's a number of bonuses to enhance your journey. There's a PDF excerpt from Matthew Fox's book, Passion for Creation, called Compassion is an Ocean, The Mystical Side to Compassion. There's also a PDF excerpt from his book, A Spirituality Named Compassion, called Broaden Your Understanding of Compassion. And a special bonus is available for those who sign up right away. And we'd like to do this as a way to really encourage you to tune in now and connect with what you've been hearing from Matthew and your own path. And if this is calling you for the next stage, then you get a special bonus to sign up right away by midnight tonight. And that's a video teaching from Matthew called Passion for Creation, the earth-honoring spirituality of Meister Eckhart. Matthew, want to share a little bit about that extra bonus folks get when they sign up today?
Well, that's the title of my big book on Eckhart that gathers 37 of his sermons and some of his treatises there too, with a commentary after each. So we'll be focusing in this class on compassion on the last section via transformative, the section of justice and compassion. And he approaches it from so many ways, from economics, from politics, from celebration and ritual, and from exegeting this statement from Jesus, be you compassionate, creator is compassionate. And also even his commentary on the Our Father, he emphasizes how the hour is said, O-U-R, is such an important word, that it's not just my Father, it's our Father, that we're in this together. And this is part of that interdependence that is so central to the whole theme of compassion. So yeah, there's a lot that Eckhart offers. And I think that what we're offering there is an outline of the many sermons that he's teaching around compassion. So that would be a basis for our journey together.
Hmm. That's a great bonus to add to this collection of wisdom and transformation. So that's for folks who sign up right away. So we've kept the investment really accessible for this program. It's just 3 payments of $128, or you save 10% when you pay in full with one payment of $349. The course is going to begin May 7th and run Tuesdays at 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern. But even if you can't make the live times, you can still get the full value with the recordings and the transcripts in the community as well. And I just want to encourage you also to go to the page and check out some of the testimonials from previous programs, really giving you a sense for the kind of impact this can have in people's lives. I found this course extremely rewarding, enriching, so inspirational. Highly recommend. Experience a mystical journey with Matthew, spaciousness and wisdom I've desired. So many great testimonials from those who have chosen to go on the pathway with Matthew and really take a deep dive into the mystical teachings and their application in our daily lives. So you're in really good, seasoned hands and there's a deep wisdom that's going to be guiding this course, and you're going to be on the journey with some beautiful other souls. So again, you can find all the details at compassioninspirituality.com, compassioninspirituality.com, and you'll get that special bonus when you sign up by midnight, which is the Passion for Creation, the earth-honoring spirituality of Meister Eckhart. So Matthew, we're at the end of our time together. Thank you for sharing your heart, your compassion, your wisdom in this hour. Anything that's still on your heart you want to share with folks who are considering doing the course with you?
Well, just that I really, really look forward to this course. I think Meister Eckhart has so much to teach us at this time. And I think the whole theme of compassion has to come forward at this time of chaos and the breaking apart of things, because now we want to look to, hey, what's the future? And I think compassion is the future. So let's start talking about it. Let's get smart, and let's draw on some of our greatest teachers and traditions and see what we can give birth to. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Beautiful.
Hope to see many of you there.
Great. Well, thank you,
Thank you.
Matthew, and thank you for all joining, and look forward to seeing many of you in the program. So again, it's all
Thank you.
at compassioninspirituality.com. Many blessings.